I'm Corbin Mitchell, 36 male. I live in Los Angeles where I run the West Coast branch of my father's company, Mitchell Motors. Or at least I used to. My life was good, I had a job I loved, a father I adored as my mentor, and a clear future. But all of that was built on a foundation that was about to be shattered by a single phone call. This is the story of how my stepmother tried to destroy my father's legacy, and how I used his final lesson to take back everything she stole. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. 1. The setup. The phone rang on a Tuesday. I was in my high-rise office in LA looking over quarterly reports and feeling proud. We were thriving. My father, Arthur Mitchell, and I had been working on these new expansion plans for months. He was in Detroit at the main headquarters, but we were in constant contact. He wasn't just my father, he was my best friend and my mentor, especially after my mom died 20 years ago. I picked up the phone. It was my father's assistant, her voice trembling so badly I could barely understand her. "Mr. Corbin, your father, he's gone. A sudden heart attack this morning." The words didn't compute. Gone, my father was a tank, a man who survived 3 recessions and never even caught a cold. The phone slipped from my grip, my entire world tilted on its axis. I don't remember saying goodbye. I grabbed my keys, told my assistant I was leaving, and just drove. The drive from my office to the freeway was a blur. I was numb. The grief was so big, so immediate that my brain just shut down. I got onto the highway, flooring the gas, trying to outrun the truth. But you can't. It hit me about an hour later. I had to pull over onto the shoulder, the car shaking as I finally broke down. I pounded the steering wheel, screaming into the silence of the car. He was gone. I'd never talk to him again. Never hear him say, "Steadfast son," his favorite piece of advice. He was everything to me, and in an instant he was just gone. I finally got to Detroit late that night, the city of my childhood feeling cold and alien. The funeral was set for 2 days later at St. Mary's, the old Greystone church downtown. When I arrived, the parking lot was overflowing with luxury cars, a testament to the empire my dad built from a single repair garage. The business elite of Detroit was there, all whispering in their black suits. I walked inside, my legs feeling like lead. The scent of lilies was suffocating, and then I saw them. My stepmother Veronica and her son from a previous marriage, Marcus. Veronica, a sharp Wall Street-type dad had married 8 years ago, was 48 but looked flawless. She was wearing a fitted black dress, greeting guests like she was hosting a gala, not a funeral. Marcus, 33 and flashy, stood beside her with a smug look he wasn't even trying to hide. A vague unease stirred in me. I'd tried to bond with them for Dad's sake, but it always felt forced. Now, seeing them in action, it felt wrong. 2. The betrayal. I tried to move past them to see my father, but Veronica spotted me. Her gaze swept over me, cold and contemptuous. Then she smiled. It wasn't a sad smile, it was a smirk of victory. Before I could process it, she stepped up to the podium, tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice echoed, sharp as a blade. "Today we gather to bid farewell to Arthur Mitchell, but this is not just a farewell. It is the start of a new chapter for Mitchell Motors." A new chapter. My father was in a casket 10 feet away from her. The room fell silent. Then she turned and pointed directly at me. "And Corbin," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You only lived off your father, a parasite, nothing more. If you have any shame, leave now. This isn't for failures." The words hit me like a physical blow. The entire church gasped. People shifted, whispering, looking at me. Parasite? I had given 12 years of my life to this company. I built the West Coast branch from nothing. My father had publicly called me the future of his company. My face burned. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream, to charge the podium and demand she take it back. But then I looked at my dad's casket. This was his send-off. I would not turn it into a circus. I swallowed the rage and the humiliation. I gave her one last look, turned my back on her, and walked out of the church. The whispers followed me all the way out, cutting into my back like knives. I waited outside, hidden behind the iron fence, until the service was over. I watched from a distance as they lowered his casket into the ground. When everyone had left, I finally went to his grave. I fell to my knees, touching the fresh-turned earth. "Dad," I whisper. "D," my voice breaking. I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I promise this won't be the end." I sat there for hours, the cold Detroit wind biting at my face, but the pain inside was colder. I didn't know it then, but this was only the beginning. The betrayal had just started. 3. The discovery. A week later, I was summoned to the reading of the will. I was staying in a small hotel, having been effectively locked out of my father's house. I walked into the lawyer's office, Lang and Associates, a firm Dad had used for years. David Lang, the head attorney, looked nervous. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Veronica and Marcus arrived late, sweeping in like royalty. "Hello, Corbin," Veronica said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Hope you're holding up." Lang cleared his throat, his hands visibly shaking as he opened the envelope. He began to read. Per the last will and testament of Arthur Mitchell, all assets, including majority shares and operational control of Mitchell Motors, shall pass to Mrs. Veronica Hale and her son, Marcus Hale. The world stopped. I just stared at him, nothing, not a single mention of me. It was as if I didn't exist. "Oh, Arthur," Veronica whispered, dabbing at a perfectly dry eye, "he always thought of the future." Marcus just grinned at me, that same smug smirk from the funeral. The very next day, I got an email summoning me to a company-wide meeting. Veronica stood on stage in a bright red suit, turning it into a power play. She announced a new vision, and then she pointed me out in the crowd. "And Corbin Mitchell," she boomed into the mic, "is incompetent and hindering our growth. He is dismissed, effective immediately." She signed my termination papers right there on stage as reporters flashed their cameras. I was ruined, humiliated, disinherited, and fired. I left Detroit and drove north for hours, ending up at our old family cabin on Lake Huron. It was the one place Dad and I always went to escape. As I sat in the dusty, cold study, I noticed the oil painting of the lake, one my mom had painted, was hanging crooked. Dad was meticulous, it was never crooked. My heart pounded. I lifted the heavy frame off the wall. Behind it was a small, digital wall safe. I never knew it existed. I tried Dad's birthday. No, the company's founding date. No. Then, with a shaking hand, I typed in my own birthday. Click, the safe opened. Inside was a waterproof bag, and inside that was the real will, notarized, signed, and clear. Everything, the company, the assets, was left to me. Beneath it was a small envelope with my name on it. I opened it. It was Dad's handwriting. "My dear son," it read, "if you're reading this, the worst has happened. I've been uneasy about Veronica. This will is the real one. Trust the evidence, not words. Uphold our honor. I love you, Arthur." For the investigation. The letter and the will felt like a jolt of electricity. My father hadn't abandoned me, he had protected me. The grief and confusion I felt were suddenly replaced by a cold, clear rage. Veronica hadn't just humiliated me, she had committed fraud, she had forged my father's will. I knew I couldn't use a lawyer like David Lang, who had clearly been bought. I needed someone my father trusted implicitly. I immediately thought of Uncle David Cole, my dad's college roommate and a razor-sharp corporate lawyer. I met him at his old, dignified office, the scent of aged paper and old books in the air. "Corbin," he said, hugging me tightly, "I've been waiting for you to call. I knew something was wrong." I laid everything from the safe on his desk, the real will, the original share certificates, and my father's letter. David studied them for a long time, his expression growing grim. "This is it," he said finally. "The notary seals, the signatures, this is genuine. The will Lang read is a forgery, and a sloppy one at that." Joy and anger warred inside me. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We move carefully," David warned. "Veronica thinks she's one, we let her think that. We need more than the will, we need to prove a pattern of fraud, we need an inside source." I knew exactly who to call, Jenna Lee. She was the chief accountant, a woman who had been with my father since the beginning. Dad had personally saved her from bankruptcy with an interest-free loan years ago, and her loyalty to him was absolute. Veronica, predictably, had seen this loyalty as a threat and demoted her to a minor internal audit role. I contacted Jenna on a secure line. "Jenna, it's Corbin, I need your help, it's about my dad." She was terrified. Veronica was watching everyone, but when I mentioned my father, she agreed. We met at a quiet cafe. "I knew she was up to something," Jenna whispered, sliding a USB drive across the table. "She's been funneling money, millions, hiding it from the main books." Back in David's office, we plugged in the drive. It was a goldmine. Jenna had captured everything Veronica and Marcus were using. Shell companies to siphon millions from the company. Phony consulting fees to Marcus, investments in ghost companies in the Cayman Islands. She wasn't just trying to take over the company, she was actively gutting it from the inside out. "This is money laundering," David said, his voice grave. "We had her." 5. The plan. While David Cole and I worked in secret, feeding our evidence to state investigators, Veronica went on a full-blown media blitz. She was the new Queen of Detroit, the visionary CEO ready to save the auto industry. It was sickening. She gave interviews, graced magazine covers, and talked about her bold new vision. Her first move was to sell off the old Flint suburb plant, a factory my dad had built with his own hands. He had always refused to sell it, saying, "We keep the factories to preserve jobs, son." Veronica sold it for pennies on the dollar to a foreign conglomerate, and the money vanished into one of her shell accounts. Next, she appointed Marcus, a guy who had never worked a real day in his life, as the chief financial officer. His first act as CFO was to buy himself a red Ferrari, listing it as a company test vehicle. He threw lavish parties, posting pictures on social media of himself with models and champagne, all on the company's dime. But her crowning achievement of arrogance was her plan to rename the company. She was erasing my father entirely. A press conference was called to announce that Mitchell Motors would now be known as Hale Automotive Group. Jenna messaged me the details. "It's a huge event, Corbin. She's invited every reporter and shareholder in the state." "It's perfect," I told David. "She's building her own stage and we're going to let her." David met with the investigators. "The press conference is our moment," he told them. "She'll be overconfident, surrounded by the media. When she's at the height of her triumph, that's when we move." The day of the conference, my heart was pounding out of my chest. I put on a simple suit, pulled a baseball cap low over my eyes, and slipped into the massive, packed auditorium through a back door Jenna left open for me. I stood in the back, just another face in the crowd, and watched. Veronica was on stage, bathed in spotlights, a triumphant smile on her face. She looked like a star. "Today," she boomed, "we witnessed the birth of a new legacy. Mitchell Motors is the past, Hale Automotive is the future." The crowd roared with applause. This was it. 6. The confrontation. As the applause for Veronica's speech reached its peak, I started to walk. I moved slowly from the back of the auditorium, my steps heavy, walking right down the center aisle. The whispers started almost immediately. That's Corbin Mitchell. What is he doing here?" The cameras swiveled from the stage to me. Veronica's triumphant smile froze, hardening into a mask of confusion and panic. "Corbin," she said, her voice wavering, no longer the powerful CEO. "What is the meaning of this, security?" I ignored her. I walked right up the steps and stood at the podium next to her. I didn't say a word. I just placed a thick stack of documents on the lectern. As I did, the giant screen behind Veronica, the one that was supposed to show the new Hale Automotive logo, flickered. Jenna, working from her audit office, had rerouted the feed. Suddenly, the screen was filled with a high-resolution scan of my father's real will. His signature, bold and clear, was visible to everyone. Beside it, the forged will, with its shaky, photoshopped signature. The hall fell into a stunned, absolute silence. You could hear a pin drop. Veronica went pale, her eyes darting between me and the screen. "This is a lie, a conspiracy," she shrieked, lunging for the microphone. "Veronica Hale," a new voice boomed from the back of the room. The main doors burst open. Investigators in black suits, flanked by uniformed officers, and our lawyer, David Cole, strode down the aisle. The lead investigator held up a warrant. "Veronica Hale, you are under investigation for will forgery, share misappropriation, and financial fraud." The room exploded. Cameras flashed like a strobe light storm. Reporters shouted questions. Marcus, who had been sitting in the front row, jumped up and tried to flee, but he was immediately blocked by security. He just stood there, ashen-faced and sweating, stammering as cameras were thrust in his face. "I did nothing wrong," Veronica screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. All her polish was gone. She was just a frantic, cornered animal. "He's lying, it's all a lie." She was led away in handcuffs, still screaming, her carefully constructed empire crumbling in seconds, all broadcast on live television. I stood silently on the stage, the flashes blinding me. I didn't have to say a word. The truth and my father's letter had said it all. 7. The aftermaths. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The stock didn't just drop, it nosedived over. 40% in a single day. Partners pulled out, deals froze, and the media had a field day. From queen to criminal, one headline blared. In a desperate, last-ditch effort, Veronica fled. With her assets frozen, she tried to make a run for it, but she was arrested at the Toronto airport, trying to board a flight with a fake passport and a suitcase full of cash. Marcus, found hiding in a border hotel, cooperated immediately, throwing his mother under the bus to save himself. The trial was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. The real will, Jenna's financial data, the testimony of my father's old friends. It was an open and shut case. Veronica was sentenced to 25 years in prison for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Marcus, for his cooperation, received probation. The day after the verdict, I walked back into headquarters not as an outcast, but as the rightful CEO. My first act was to call an all-hands meeting. I stood on the same stage where I had been fired. My father, Arthur Mitchell, built this company on one principle, honor, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet hall. We lost that, today we get it back. I immediately fired Veronica's entire executive team. Then, I rehired the loyal staff she had pushed out, promoting Jenna Lee to CFO and bringing back old engineers like Hank, who had designed the first engine with my dad. We rebuilt piece by piece. I refocused the company on my father's real dream, sustainable green technology. We invested in EV research and young talent. It took years, but Mitchell Motors not only recovered, it became more successful than ever. I also used the reclaimed funds to start the Arthur Mitchell Foundation, a scholarship program for young engineers from Detroit. Months later, I got a request to visit Veronica in prison. I went not for her but for me. She sat behind the glass, gray and gaunt. I don't regret it, she whispered. I just wanted a better future for my son. I just looked at her. Living better doesn't mean trampling on the people who trust you. Dad trusted you. I stood up and walked away, feeling no anger, just a quiet release. I still go to the cabin on Lake Huron. I sit in the study, look at my mother's painting, and sometimes I reread my father's letter. The company is safe, his legacy is secure, and I finally understand his last, greatest lesson. Money and power can be stolen, but honor is the one thing you can never lose.